My name is Nina, and at 68, I never thought I would have to fight for respect in my own home. After welcoming my son Thomas and his wife Amanda to live with me temporarily, 3 years have passed with increasing tension. I have always loved my grandchildren more than anything and tried to support their parents through difficult times. But yesterday, when Amanda publicly dismissed me in front of family and friends, something inside me finally broke. Before I continue my story, where are you watching from today? If you have ever felt undervalued by family members you sacrificed for, please subscribe and join our community of supporters. This house has been my sanctuary for 40 years. My late husband Harold and I purchased it when Thomas was just a baby, scraping together every penny for the down payment. Harold worked as an engineer, while I taught 3rd grade at Lincoln Elementary. We were not wealthy by any means, but we were determined to provide a stable home for our son. Harold would often joke that the mortgage payments were worth it just to see Thomas racing through the backyard with neighborhood friends. When Harold passed away 12 years ago from heart failure, I was devastated but grateful that we had paid off the mortgage just 2 years prior. His life insurance policy, while modest, provided enough for me to maintain the house and continue living comfortably in retirement. I had my teacher pension, Social Security, and the security of owning my home outright. I felt blessed, despite my grief. Thomas grew up happy in this house. The marks measuring his height still adorn the kitchen doorframe, and the treehouse Harold built him still stands in the old oak tree, out back, though it has weathered with time. Every corner of this home holds memories of birthday parties, holiday gatherings, and ordinary moments that built our family story. Thomas learned to ride his bike in our driveway, did his homework at the kitchen table, I still use today, and announced his college acceptance letter standing in the living room. 8 years ago, Thomas introduced me to Amanda. They met at a charity fundraiser where Thomas was showcasing some of his architectural designs. He was 32 and established in his career, while Amanda was 28 and working in social media marketing. Thomas was immediately smitten. Within 6 months, they were inseparable. Amanda was beautiful, ambitious, and seemed to adore my son. I was happy to see Thomas find someone after several relationships that had ended painfully. Their wedding 5 years ago was lovely, though smaller than I would have imagined due to their budget constraints. I contributed what I could to help them have a special day. I welcomed Amanda warmly into our family, hopeful that she would be the partner Thomas deserved. I made conscious efforts to build a good relationship with her, careful not to intrude, but always available if needed. When Lily was born 4 years ago, I fell completely in love with my granddaughter. Her tiny fingers, curious eyes, and sweet temperament reminded me so much of Thomas as a baby. Amanda struggled with postpartum depression, so I offered support without overstepping. I would bring over homemade meals, help with laundry, or simply hold Lily so Amanda could shower or nap. Thomas was grateful for my help, and for a while Amanda seemed to be as well. Jackson arrived 2 years later, a boisterous, energetic boy from his first day. With 2 small children, Thomas and Amanda began struggling financially. Thomas had always been talented in architectural design, but the small firm he worked for was hit hard during an economic downturn. Projects dried up, his hours were cut, and eventually he was laid off. He picked up freelance work when possible, but it was inconsistent. Amanda maintained her part-time job as a social media consultant, working primarily from home while caring for the children. Her income was not enough to cover their expenses, and Thomas was finding it difficult to secure a new full-time position in architecture. Their savings dwindled rapidly with rent, childcare costs, and everyday expenses. 3 years ago, Thomas called me, his voice heavy with embarrassment. They had received an eviction notice after falling 3 months behind on rent. He asked if they could move in with me temporarily, just until he found steady employment again. He promised it would be for 6 months at most. Without hesitation, I said yes. How could I not? This was my only child, my grandchildren. I had 3 bedrooms in my house and lived alone. It seemed like the perfect solution for everyone. Thomas was visibly relieved when they moved in, and the children were delighted to be with their grandmother every day. Amanda thanked me profusely, promising they would contribute what they could to household expenses and help maintain the home. The first few months were actually wonderful. The house felt alive again with the patter of little feet and childish laughter. I enjoyed preparing meals for everyone and reading bedtime stories to Lily and Jackson. Thomas continued his job search, while taking on whatever freelance projects came his way. Amanda worked from my dining room table, juggling childcare and client calls. Looking back, I can see the subtle signs of Amanda's resentment beginning even then. Small comments about how I loaded the dishwasher, gentle corrections when I was playing with the children, slight rearrangements of items in my kitchen. I dismissed these as normal adjustments of multiple adults sharing a space. After all, we all have our preferences and routines. I wanted to be understanding during what was clearly a stressful time for their family. In those early days, I still believed this arrangement was truly temporary. I still had faith that Amanda appreciated my help and respected my home. As months stretched into a year and then beyond, the temporary nature of our arrangement seemed to fade from everyone's memory except mine. Thomas continued to struggle finding full-time work in his field, though he did secure more regular freelance projects. Amanda expanded her client base, but kept her work deliberately part-time to care for the children. I began to notice that neither of them mentioned moving out anymore. I genuinely enjoyed helping with my grandchildren. Watching Lily learn her letters and Jackson take his first steps brought immeasurable joy to my days. I would care for them while Thomas and Amanda worked baking cookies with Lily and building block towers with Jackson. These moments were precious to me, connections I had dreamed about since becoming a grandmother. However, Amanda began critiquing my interactions with the children more frequently. If I gave Lily a cookie before dinner, Amanda would comment about sugar intake and routines. When I comforted Jackson after a fall, she would suggest I was coddling him. Each criticism was delivered with a smile and a light tone, but the message was clear. I was not parenting correctly in her eyes. Thomas found himself caught in the middle. When I mentioned Amanda's corrections to him privately, he would sigh and say, "Mom, Amanda just has specific ideas about raising the kids. It does not mean your way is wrong." He became a diplomat in his own home, never fully supporting either his wife or his mother, attempting to keep peace above all else. The physical space of the house began to change too. Amanda started redecorating without consulting me. First, it was just replacing throw pillows on the couch, then rearranging furniture in the living room. I came home from a dental appointment one day to find my antique coffee table replaced with a more child-friendly ottoman. When I asked about my table, Amanda cheerfully informed me she had stored it in the garage for safekeeping. Gradually, family photographs that had adorned the walls for decades were taken down and replaced with stylish prints and photos of Thomas, Amanda, and the children. My wedding portrait with Harold was relegated to my bedroom, deemed too old-fashioned for the main living area. Each change was justified as making the space more functional for the children or updating the dated decor. I attempted to discuss boundaries respectfully. One evening after the children were asleep, I said to both Thomas and Amanda, "I understand you want to make this space comfortable for your family, but I would appreciate being consulted before changes are made to the common areas." Amanda responded with a tight smile. "We just want to make sure the house is safe and appropriate for Lily and Jackson. I am sure you want that too, right, Nina?" Her tone implied that disagreeing would make me a bad grandmother, effectively shutting down further discussion. Thomas simply looked uncomfortable and mumbled something about family needing to compromise. The conversation ended there with nothing resolved. As more of my belongings were stored away and more of my routines disrupted, I found myself retreating to smaller spaces within my own home. My bedroom became my primary sanctuary, the only place I could count on remaining unchanged. I set up a small reading nook by the window where I could enjoy my books in peace. Throughout these changes, Lily and Jackson remained my emotional anchors. Lily would seek me out for stories, her small hand in mine as she led me to the bookshelf. Jackson would crawl into my lap for cuddles, his soft hair tickling my chin as he fell asleep against me. These small moments sustained me even as I felt increasingly displaced. One afternoon, as I returned from the grocery store earlier than expected, I overheard Amanda on the phone with a friend in the kitchen. "Living with my mother-in-law is such a burden," she said with a sigh. "She means well, but her old-fashioned ideas about children are exhausting. Plus, Thomas and I have no privacy. We cannot wait until we can afford our own place again." I quietly retreated back to the front door, then made a noisy entrance to prevent Amanda from knowing I had overheard. But her words stayed with me a constant ache. I was a burden in my own home, my presence merely tolerated. Despite the hurt, I reminded myself that they were still struggling financially. Thomas had been turned down for several positions that would have provided the stability they needed to move out. I told myself to be patient, to remember that this difficult period would eventually end. I focused on being grateful for time with my grandchildren and tried to minimize friction with Amanda. But as the second year of our arrangement began, I could no longer deny that I felt like an outsider in my own home. The house I had filled with love for 40 years no longer felt like mine. I had become a guest, expected to be grateful for being allowed to remain. By the beginning of the third year, Amanda had become bolder in her tactics to minimize my presence in family life. She began scheduling family activities during times when she knew I had standing commitments. My weekly book club meeting suddenly coincided with Sunday family brunches. My volunteer shift at the community center clashed with trips to the Children's Museum. When I would mention wanting to join them another time, Amanda would smile and say, "We would not want to disrupt your schedule, Nina." Family photographs became another battleground. When Thomas's cousin visited and asked to take a picture of the whole family, Amanda quickly arranged Thomas and the children pulling me out of frame with a whispered, "Could you take the picture for us, Nina?" This happened repeatedly, until I realized it was intentional. I was being erased from family documentation one photo at a time. Last Thanksgiving provided another painful moment. I had spent 2 days preparing my traditional family recipes. The turkey stuffing, cranberry sauce, and pumpkin pie were all made from scratch, just as I had done throughout Thomas's childhood. When guests complimented the meal, Amanda smoothly responded, "Thank you. I added some special touches to the family recipes this year." She had added a single herb to the stuffing and claimed credit for the entire meal. Thomas noticed my expression and later privately thanked me for cooking, but never corrected Amanda's claim in front of our guests. His willingness to let small injustices slide to avoid conflict with his wife had become a pattern. The boy who once vehemently defended even strangers had become a man who would not stand up for his own mother. My neighbor Dorothy became my lifeline during this time. A widow herself, she understood the complexity of family dynamics and provided the outside perspective I desperately needed. Over coffee in her kitchen, away from my increasingly uncomfortable home, I could speak freely about my frustrations. "You have to establish boundaries," Nina Dorothy advised after listening to my latest story of being sidelined. "That is your house, your home. You have been generous, but generosity should not mean becoming invisible." I knew she was right, but the fear of creating conflict that might separate me from my grandchildren kept me silent. I would rather endure Amanda's subtle cruelties than risk losing daily contact with Lily and Jackson. The children's birthdays became particularly difficult events. For Lily's 3rd birthday, I had carefully chosen a beautiful dollhouse, one that reminded me of a toy Thomas had loved as a child. I saved for months to afford it, wrapping it with ribbons and anticipation. When Lily opened it, her eyes lit up with delight. But before she could fully explore it, Amanda presented her own gift. A newer, larger dollhouse, with electric lights and designer furniture. My gift was immediately forgotten, relegated to a corner, while Lily played with her mother's more impressive present. The pattern repeated for Jackson's birthday and Christmas. Whatever gift I gave, Amanda would overshadow it with something bigger, flashier, and more expensive. My thoughtfulness was no match for Amanda's determination to be the primary gift giver, the most important adult in her children's lives. Amanda's control extended to household decisions as well. Without consulting me, she hired painters to change the color of the living room from the warm yellow Harold and I had chosen to a trendy gray. She replaced the refrigerator when it was merely making occasional noises, selecting an expensive model with features we did not need. Each decision was presented as already completed with no opportunity for me to object. Perhaps most distressing was finding my personal belongings moved without permission. My collection of vintage teacups, carefully displayed in the dining room hutch for decades, was boxed and stored in the attic to make room for Amanda's modern dishware. The quilt my grandmother had made, which had always adorned the back of the living room sofa, was deemed too fragile and put away. Even my gardening tools were rearranged in the shed, making it difficult for me to find what I needed for my beloved flower beds. These constant reminders of my diminished status in my own home took an emotional toll. I began questioning my worth, my place in the family, and even my memories. Had I been too strict with Thomas growing up? Had I somehow failed as a mother, creating this dynamic where my son would not defend me? Was I truly as outdated and irrelevant as Amanda made me feel? Late at night when the house was quiet, I would look at photographs of Harold and me in happier times. I would remember how we had partnered in raising Thomas, supporting each other through the challenges of parenthood. Harold would never have allowed me to be treated this way, and I wondered when I had lost my own ability to stand up for myself. The most hurtful incident before the final breaking point occurred at a neighborhood barbecue. As we gathered in the Johnsons' backyard, Amanda was chatting with some younger mothers. I overheard her response when asked about their living situation. "Yes, we live with Thomas's mother, but it is really working out well for everyone," she said with a practiced smile. "She gets to have company in her old age and we get built-in childcare. The arrangement just makes sense at this stage of her life." Her words reduced me to nothing more than an aging woman in need of company and a convenient babysitter. Not the homeowner who had opened her doors out of love. Not a woman with her own interests, experiences, and contributions. Just an elderly convenience. I walked away before she could see the tears in my eyes, pretending to be interested in the flower garden until I could compose myself. That night I cried myself to sleep for the first time since Harold died, feeling more alone than ever despite the full house. Lily's 4th birthday approached in late spring, bringing with it the expected stress of celebration planning. I suggested a simple backyard party with a few of her friends from preschool, a homemade cake and games in the garden. It would be meaningful without being extravagant, appropriate for a 4-year-old whose attention span was still developing. "That sounds so basic," Amanda responded with a slight wrinkle of her nose. "Lily deserves a special celebration. I was thinking we could rent that new indoor play space with the princess theme. They do everything: decorations, entertainment, food. Lily would absolutely love it." When Thomas mentioned the cost, nearly $800 for a 3-hour party, Amanda dismissed his concerns. "It is only once a year, Thomas. Do you want your daughter to have a memorable birthday or not?" I saw the conflict on my son's face. He wanted to provide special experiences for Lily, but was acutely aware of their financial situation. He had recently been passed over for a promising full-time position, and freelance work had been slower than usual. "I can help with the cost," I offered, not wanting to see either Thomas or Lily disappointed. Though I lived on a fixed income, I had always set aside money for special occasions with my grandchildren. Amanda accepted immediately without so much as a thank you. "Perfect, I will call tomorrow to book it. Lily is going to be so excited." I wrote the check that evening, telling myself it was worth it to see my granddaughter's joy. But a small voice inside questioned whether Lily would have been equally happy with bubbles and cupcakes in the backyard. The day before the party was frantic. I spent hours helping Amanda prepare goodie bags for 20 children, filling them with princess-themed trinkets and candy. I ironed Lily's special birthday dress and helped Thomas hang a birthday banner in the living room for when Lily woke up the next morning. The morning of the party, Amanda was busy finalizing decorations she was bringing to supplement the venue's setup. I offered to watch both children so she could focus on her tasks. "Thanks, Nina," she said absently, barely looking up from the elaborate tulle and ribbon centerpiece she was constructing. "Make sure Lily does not mess up her hair. I just styled it perfectly." I spent a lovely morning with my grandchildren reading to Lily while helping her stay clean in her party dress and keeping Jackson entertained with building blocks. When it was time to leave for the venue, I helped buckle both children into their car seats and sat with them in the back while Thomas drove, and Amanda continued checking her party planning list in the front seat. The play space was elaborately decorated with a princess castle theme, complete with throne for the birthday girl and crowns for all the guests. Amanda immediately took charge, directing the staff about placement of decorations and the timing of activities. I found myself relegated to watching Jackson while Lily was swept into the celebration. As guests arrived, Amanda played the perfect hostess, greeting each family warmly and showcasing the expensive venue. Thomas stayed near the food tables, making small talk with the fathers who had accompanied their children. I moved between helping any child who needed assistance and keeping Jackson entertained. During a lull in the activities, one of Amanda's friends, Stephanie, approached me as I helped a little girl adjust her paper crown. "This is such a beautiful venue," Stephanie commented. "You must be so proud of your lovely home and family." Before I could respond, Amanda appeared beside us, an artificial smile fixed on her face. "Oh, this is not Nina's venue," she corrected smoothly. "And actually, this is not her home either. She is just helping out with the kids." "Right, Nina." The dismissive way she said, "just helping out," made her meaning crystal clear to everyone within earshot. In Amanda's narrative, I was not the homeowner, the grandmother, or even a contributing family member. I was just the babysitter. Complete silence fell over our corner of the room. Stephanie looked mortified at the misunderstanding and mumbled an apology before quickly moving away. Several other parents who had overheard glanced at me with uncomfortable expressions, clearly unsure how to react to such a public dismissal. The humiliation burned through me like wildfire. After all I had done, after opening my home and my heart, after contributing financially to this very party, I was being publicly reduced to household help. I looked to Thomas, hoping he would correct his wife's characterization, but he was across the room, seemingly oblivious to what had just occurred. I maintained my composure, somehow smiling stiffly and turning my attention back to Jackson. Years of teaching elementary school had taught me how to compartmentalize emotions in front of children. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. A line had been crossed that could not be uncrossed. As soon as it would not disrupt Lily's special day, I quietly told Thomas I was not feeling well and would return home. He looked concerned but distracted by the chaos of 20 sugar-fueled preschoolers. Amanda barely acknowledged my departure, busy orchestrating the cake-cutting ceremony. At home, in the quiet of the house that had been mine for 4 decades, I finally let the tears come. I cried for the disrespect I had endured, for the relationship with my son that had deteriorated, and for my own failure to maintain dignity in my home. I cried until no more tears would come, sitting in Harold's old armchair clutching a photograph of our happier days. As the evening deepened into night, and the family still had not returned from the extended party celebration, I realized I had reached my breaking point. I could no longer continue in this untenable situation. Something had to change, and since no one else seemed willing to initiate that change, it would have to be me. The morning after Lily's birthday party, I called Dorothy and asked if we could meet for coffee. The local diner became our refuge as I poured out the entire humiliating experience. She called me the babysitter, Dorothy, in front of everyone. After all I have done, my hands trembled slightly around my coffee mug, and Thomas just stood there. He did not say a word. Dorothy reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "This has gone on long enough, Nina. That house is yours. Those boundaries are yours to set. You have been more than generous, but there comes a point where generosity becomes self-harm." Her words resonated deeply. I had allowed my desire to help my family override my own well-being. In trying to be the perfect accommodating mother and grandmother, I had enabled a situation that was damaging to everyone, including the children who were learning that treating me with disrespect was acceptable. That afternoon I visited James Richards, the attorney who had handled Harold's estate and had been our family lawyer for 30 years. I brought all my property documents, including the deed to the house. "I need to understand my options, James," I explained after bringing him up to date on the situation. "They have been living with me for 3 years now. Do they have any legal claim to my home?" James reviewed my documents carefully. "Absolutely not, Nina. This property is solely in your name. You have never created any formal rental agreement, and even if you had as the owner, you would still have significant rights. What exactly are you considering?" I considered the question carefully. I do not want to evict my son and his family abruptly. I love them despite everything. But I need to reclaim my position and my home. I need them to understand that they are guests, not owners, and that their presence requires mutual respect. By the end of our meeting, I had a clear understanding of my legal standing and some potential approaches to address the situation. James offered to send a formal letter if needed, but I hoped it would not come to that. This was, after all, my family. That evening, I stood in front of Harold's photograph in my bedroom. "What would you do, my love?" I asked the smiling face that had been my partner for 42 years. Though no audible answer came, I felt a certainty in my heart that Harold would want me to stand up for myself, to maintain the dignity and respect we had always shown each other and taught our son to value. Over the next few days, I began researching affordable housing options in our area. I looked into apartments, small houses for rent, and even condominiums that might be within Thomas and Amanda's budget, especially if they no longer had to contribute to my household expenses. I made notes and collected information, preparing for the conversation I knew I needed to have. The internal struggle continued. My maternal instinct wanted to protect and provide for my son and grandchildren regardless of personal cost. But my sense of self-respect, dormant for too long, pushed back against this self-sacrificial impulse. I set a deadline. I would address the situation within 2 weeks, before I lost my resolve. In small ways, I began reclaiming spaces in my home. I brought my grandmother's quilt out of storage and returned it to the sofa. I moved one of my favorite paintings back to the living room wall. When Amanda raised an eyebrow at these changes, I simply smiled and said I missed seeing these things every day. My confidence grew incrementally. When Amanda suggested another rearrangement of the kitchen cabinets, I firmly but politely declined. The current organization works well for me, and since I do most of the cooking, I would prefer to keep things as they are. Her surprise at my assertion was evident, but she did not push the issue. Thomas noticed the subtle shift in dynamics. One afternoon, as we folded laundry together, he asked, "Is everything okay, Mom? You seem different lately." I considered how to respond. "I am finding my voice again, Thomas. It got lost somewhere along the way." He looked troubled but did not probe further. I wondered if he sensed the coming conversation, if some part of him recognized the imbalance that had developed in our household. A week after Lily's birthday party, Amanda suggested a family dinner to discuss summer plans. It seemed the perfect opportunity to address the larger issues at hand. As we gathered around the dining table I had selected with Harold decades ago, Amanda launched into her ideas for summer activities for the children. "I thought we could convert part of the backyard into a water play area," she said enthusiastically. "We could put in one of those large inflatable pools and maybe even a small splash pad. The kids would love it." "That sounds expensive," Thomas commented cautiously, "and would require some landscaping changes." Amanda dismissed his concern. "It would be worth it. And it is just the backyard. It is not like we are changing anything structural." The casual way she discussed altering my property without consideration for my input or the cost pushed me closer to my breaking point. "I would need to think about such significant changes to the yard," I interjected. "That garden has been established for years." Amanda gave me a condescending smile. "Nina, the yard is so outdated, and the children need a space that is actually fun and usable. Your flower beds are pretty, but they are not practical for a modern family." "A modern family that is living in my home," I replied quietly. Amanda's expression tightened. "We contribute to this household too, you know. We buy groceries and help with utilities. Besides, you would be all alone in this big house if we were not here. And who would help you with all the maintenance and yard work?" Her implication that I was dependent on them, rather than the reverse, stung sharply. Thomas shifted uncomfortably in his seat but remained silent once again. "I managed this home for years before you moved in," I reminded her, "and could do so again if necessary." "Mom, nobody is suggesting you cannot manage," Thomas finally spoke up, always the peacemaker. "We just all need to work together as a family." "Are we working together as a family?" I asked him directly. "Or am I just the convenient babysitter living in your house? Because that is how it was presented at Lily's birthday party." Thomas looked confused, then alarmed. "What are you talking about?" I explained the interaction with Stephanie and Amanda's dismissive comment. Thomas turned to his wife with a questioning look. Amanda sighed dramatically. You are blowing this completely out of proportion. I simply corrected a misunderstanding about the venue. Stephanie thought you owned the play space. No, I said firmly. You specifically said I was just helping out with the kids. You diminished my role in this family and my position in my own home. And it was not the first time. Amanda's expression hardened. Look, I appreciate everything you do for the children. But you have to understand this is our family unit now. Thomas, the kids, and me. You are important too, of course, but things change. Families evolve. We cannot keep living like this is still your home from the 1980s. We have different needs now. And there it was, the absolute clarity of her perspective. In Amanda's view, I was an accessory to their family, not an integral part of it. And my home of 40 years was now their territory to control and modify as they saw fit. I knew then that the moment had come for my stand. I would like to have a family meeting tomorrow evening, I announced calmly. There are some important matters we need to discuss regarding our living arrangement. Thomas looked concerned, clearly sensing the seriousness of my tone. Amanda appeared annoyed, as if my request was an inconvenience in her busy schedule. Do we really need a formal meeting? We are all right here, Amanda objected. Yes, we do, I replied firmly. Tomorrow at 7 after the children are in bed, please make sure you are both available. Thomas nodded quickly. Of course, Mom, we will be here. For the next 24 hours, I prepared myself mentally and emotionally for what needed to be said. I gathered the necessary documents and organized my thoughts. I was not seeking conflict, but clarity and respect were long overdue. The following evening, after Lily and Jackson were tucked in with bedtime stories, we gathered in the living room. Thomas sat tensely on the edge of the sofa while Amanda took the armchair, her posture defensive before a word had been spoken. I took a deep breath and began. First, I want you both to know that I love you. Thomas, you are my only son, and I have loved you from the moment you were born. Amanda, you are the mother of my precious grandchildren, and I have tried to welcome you as a daughter. Lily and Jackson are the lights of my life. Amanda shifted impatiently. If this is about the comment at Lily's party, I already explained. I held up my hand, something I had never done before in our interactions. To my surprise, she fell silent. This is about much more than a single comment. This is about the fundamental understanding of whose home this is and how we treat each other within it. I kept my voice calm, but firm. For 3 years I have opened my home to you. I have contributed financially, provided childcare, and gradually given up spaces and belongings that mattered to me, all to make you comfortable. Thomas looked down at his hands. Mom, we appreciate everything you have done. Please let me finish, Thomas. Another first. I had never interrupted my son as an adult. The arrangement was supposed to be temporary. 6 months was the original time frame mentioned. It has now been 3 years. And not only has the temporary nature of the arrangement been forgotten, but the basic respect due to me in my own home has eroded. Amanda began to protest, but I continued steadily. I have been excluded from family photos, had my belongings moved without permission, been corrected in how I interact with my own grandchildren, and ultimately been publicly characterized as just the babysitter. My role has been systematically diminished in a home that I have owned and maintained for 40 years. Thomas finally looked up, genuine distress in his eyes. Mom, I had no idea you felt this way. Why did not you say something sooner? I tried in small ways. But my concerns were dismissed, and you, Thomas, rarely supported me when conflicts arose. The hurt was evident in my voice, despite my efforts to remain composed. I did not want to cause problems. I did not want to risk my relationship with any of you, especially the children, but I cannot continue like this. Amanda sat up straighter, her expression hardening. So, what exactly are you saying? That you want us to move out? Where are we supposed to go? You know our financial situation. Her immediate defensiveness, rather than any acknowledgement of my feelings, confirmed I was making the right decision. What I want is respect and recognition in my own home, I stated clearly. I want acknowledgement that this house is in fact my home, where I have graciously allowed you to stay, not the other way around. Amanda rolled her eyes slightly. This is ridiculous. Yes, technically the house is in your name, but we have been living here for years now. We have made it our home too. The children consider this their home. You cannot just suddenly decide to assert some kind of authority over us. That was the final push I needed. Without another word, I stood and walked to my home office. From the safe hidden in the closet, I retrieved the deed to the house, my property tax records, and several other important documents. I returned to the living room and placed them on the coffee table between us. Actually, this entire house is mine, I said, pushing the deed toward Amanda. Not just technically. Legally and in every other way that matters. I have paid off the mortgage. I pay the property taxes. I pay the homeowner's insurance. My name is the only name on every single one of these documents. Amanda stared at the papers, momentarily speechless. Thomas looked stricken, a flush of shame coloring his face. Mom, nobody is disputing that the house is yours, he said quietly. But you have allowed it to be disputed, Thomas. Through silence and inaction, you have allowed your wife to treat me as an intruder in my own home. I looked directly at Amanda. I am not asking you to leave immediately. I understand that would be difficult for everyone, especially the children. What I am asking for is a choice. I laid out my terms clearly. Option 1. You can continue living here with me, but with clearly established boundaries and mutual respect. I will be consulted on changes to the house. My belongings will not be moved without permission. My role as both homeowner and grandmother will be acknowledged and respected. I took another deep breath. Option 2, I will help you find and transition to your own place. I have researched affordable options in the area that would keep you close enough for regular visits with the children. I am even willing to help financially with the initial moving costs and deposits. Amanda stared at me in disbelief. You cannot be serious. I am entirely serious, I confirmed. This situation has become untenable for me, and it is not healthy for any of us, including Lily and Jackson, who are learning that it is acceptable to disrespect their grandmother. We cannot afford to move right now, Amanda protested. Thomas is still trying to find full-time work. The job market is difficult. I understand that, which is why I am offering to help and why option 1 is available. But make no mistake, these are the only 2 options moving forward. The current dynamic will not continue. I then outlined specific boundaries. I would have final say on any changes to the house structure or decor in common areas. Family photos, including me, would be restored to the walls. I would have the freedom to interact with my grandchildren without constant correction while still respecting Amanda and Thomas as their parents. Most importantly, my position as the homeowner would be clearly communicated and respected. Amanda's initial anger began to give way to reluctant acceptance as she realized the seriousness of the situation. The documents on the table made the reality undeniable. This was my house, and I was finally reclaiming my authority within it. I need you both to think about this and let me know your decision within the week, I concluded. Whatever you choose, I want us to move forward as a family, but on terms that include mutual respect. As I finished speaking, Thomas finally found his voice in a meaningful way. Mom, I am so sorry, he said, genuine remorse in his eyes. I had no idea how badly I have been treating you. You opened your home to us when we had nowhere else to go, and we have taken advantage of your generosity. He turned to Amanda. And she is right. We have been acting like this is our house, making changes and decisions without considering that this has been Mom's home for decades. I should have spoken up long before now. Amanda remained silent, her expression unreadable. But the dynamic in the room had shifted perceptibly. For the first time in years, I felt seen and heard in my own home. Thank you for listening, I said, gathering the documents. Please take some time to discuss this privately and let me know your thoughts. As I left the room, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. Regardless of their decision, I had finally stood up for myself, and that alone was a victory worth celebrating. The days following our confrontation were filled with a palpable tension. Conversations were polite but brief, and we all moved carefully around each other like dancers learning new steps to an unfamiliar song. The children, perceptive as always, sensed the shift in atmosphere, but could not understand its cause. On the 3rd day, Thomas asked if we could speak privately. We sat in the garden, surrounded by the roses I had tended for decades. their fragrance a comforting reminder of continuity amidst change. "Mom, I want to apologize properly," Thomas began, his voice thick with emotion. "Not just for recently, but for the past 3 years. I failed you as a son. Dad would be so disappointed in how I have behaved." "Your father would want us to find a path forward," I said gently. "Regret has its place, but healing is more important." Thomas nodded, wiping away unexpected tears. "Amanda and I have been talking a lot about everything you said about our situation. We both realize we have taken advantage of your generosity. I especially should have known better. You raised me with better values than I have been showing." He took a deep breath. "We want to stay if you will still have us under the terms you outlined. Amanda agrees that we need to respect your home and your position in it. But we also think we should start actively saving for our own place. Not to leave immediately, but to have a plan for the future that does not rely indefinitely on your generosity." Relief and gratitude washed through me. This was the son I had raised, finding his way back to the values we had instilled in him. "That sounds like a wise approach," I agreed. "And yes, I still want you here as long as we can maintain mutual respect." The initial changes were small but significant. Amanda returned my wedding portrait to the living room wall. Thomas fixed the cabinet door in the kitchen that had been loose for months. Amanda began asking, rather than telling, when she wanted to make changes to shared spaces. The most profound shift came in our interactions around the children. Amanda still occasionally winced when I allowed an extra cookie or played more boisterously than she preferred, but she stopped correcting me publicly. Instead, we began having private conversations about the children's routines and needs, approaching childcare as a partnership rather than a hierarchy. Thomas suggested family counseling, a surprise that indicated how seriously he was taking our reconciliation. "We all have patterns and assumptions we might not even recognize," he explained. "A neutral party could help us communicate better." I agreed, and Amanda reluctantly consented as well. Our first session was uncomfortable, with Amanda defensive and Thomas anxious to mediate. But the counselor skillfully guided us toward expressing underlying fears and expectations. Amanda admitted feeling intimidated by my established relationship with Thomas and the children, fearing she would always be secondary in her own family. I acknowledged my fear of becoming irrelevant and forgotten in my own home. "These are normal, intergenerational conflicts," the counselor assured us. "The key is recognizing that respect can flow in multiple directions simultaneously, and that different roles in the family, mother, wife, grandmother, all have value and importance." Over subsequent sessions, we developed better communication strategies and clearer boundaries. The process was sometimes painful, but ultimately healing for all of us. Meanwhile, Thomas redoubled his efforts to find stable employment. He expanded his job search beyond strictly architectural positions, applying his design skills to adjacent fields. Amanda began taking on additional clients, increasing her work hours now that we had established a more collaborative approach to childcare. Within 2 months, they had started a modest savings account earmarked for future housing. I helped them explore realistic options, considering school districts for the children and commute distances for work. We discussed timeframes and budgets, openly transforming what had been a nebulous someday into a concrete plan. 6 months after our confrontation, Thomas was offered a position with a construction management firm that valued his architectural background. The salary was less than he had earned at his previous firm, but offered stability and growth potential. Amanda had built her client base to nearly full-time income. For the first time in years, moving out became financially feasible. They found a 3-bedroom apartment in a pleasant complex just 2 miles from my house, close enough for regular visits, but separate enough for healthy boundaries. When they signed the lease, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: pride in their independent satisfaction, in the restoration of our relationship, and yes, a tinge of sadness at the coming change in my daily life. The moving day was emotional for everyone. Lily did not understand why they were leaving Grandma's house and needed multiple reassurances that she would still see me regularly. Jackson, now 5, helped carry his smallest toys to the moving truck with determined importance. As we stood in the driveway, watching the last boxes being loaded, Amanda approached me. "I owe you an apology," she said, her voice unusually humble. I was insecure and took it out on you. Instead of being grateful for your help, I tried to push you out of your own home. That was wrong of me." Her acknowledgement, though long overdue, meant a great deal. "Thank you for saying that, Amanda. We all contributed to the situation in different ways. What matters is that we found a better path forward." She nodded, then surprised me with a brief but genuine hug before turning to help Lily into the car. With the family moved into their new apartment, I reclaimed my home while maintaining close ties to my grandchildren. We established a regular schedule of family dinners at my house, every Sunday. I kept a drawer of clothes and toys for the children for impromptu visits. Thomas and I resumed our tradition of weekend gardening together, something we had enjoyed when he was younger. Amanda and I developed a more respectful relationship, finding common ground in our love for Thomas and the children. She began asking for my family recipes, a small but meaningful acknowledgement of my history and contribution. I made efforts to respect her parenting decisions, recognizing that different approaches did not necessarily mean one was wrong. The experience taught me profound lessons about the importance of self-respect at any age. In my 60s, I had fallen into the trap of believing that self-sacrifice was the only way to demonstrate love. I learned that maintaining boundaries is not selfish, but necessary for healthy relationships. By allowing myself to be diminished, I had enabled behaviors that were ultimately harmful to everyone involved, including the children who were learning unhealthy family dynamics. With my newfound time and peace, I began volunteering at a community center teaching a weekly crafts class to seniors. Many of them shared similar stories of family tensions and boundary struggles. I found purpose in helping others navigate these complex waters, sharing my experience without bitterness or regret. The house felt different with just me in it. Quieter, certainly, but also more peaceful. I redecorated slowly, keeping the best elements of Amanda's changes while restoring aspects that were meaningful to me. The result was a blend of old and new that felt right for this chapter of my life. On Lily's 5th birthday, we celebrated with a simple party in my backyard, exactly the kind of gathering I had originally suggested a year earlier. Amanda and I planned it together, each contributing ideas and respecting the other's input. As I watched my granddaughter blowing out candles surrounded by family in genuine harmony, I realized that the painful journey had led us to a healthier place than where we began. True generosity, I have come to believe, must include respecting oneself. When we give from a place of strength rather than fear, when we establish clear boundaries alongside our offerings of help, we create the foundation for relationships built on mutual respect, rather than obligation or resentment. If you have ever found yourself diminished in relationships with those you love most, remember that standing up for yourself is not selfish, but necessary. Age does not diminish your right to respect, especially in spaces you have created and maintained. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to say, "This is mine, and I matter here." Have you ever had to reclaim your place in your own home or family? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more life lessons from someone who has learned them the hard way. And remember to share with anyone who might need to be reminded of their worth in their own space. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to stand firm in your truth, whatever that may be.